I am at a fort today that was manned during 5 different wars throughout America's history. However, it never fired a shot. There is very easily traceable ways you can notice between the defensive structures that are still here. You can see the time change in history between military engineering on defensive fortifications, between the structures that are here that were built during the second system of U.S. fortifications and the third system. And then by the time the Endicott program came around, Fort McClary was pretty much left abandoned at that point. Historically, you can trace back a defensive position always being on this property as far back as the late 1600s, when William Pepperell bought the property and erected a very crude, simple fortification here, which in today's world there are no traces left of whatever was first erected here. Now, the very first fortification that Pepperell would have built here was to protect the village of Portsmouth, which is just up the river. Now, all that was before Portsmouth would have been defended by across the river on the New Hampshire side by Fort William and Mary, which became later known as Fort Constitution. So William Pepperell had his property here, his fortification seized by Patriot militia in 1775, and in 1776, just the next year, the fort was manned and equipped with 9 and 12-pounder cannons. It was manned until 1779 by the New Hampshire militia. And now, Fort McClary was established in 1808, and it was named after Andrew McClary, who died at the Battle of Bunker Hill. It consisted of a lower battery of 9 or 10 cannons, as well as a shot furnace. And a shot furnace is exactly what it sounds like. And I go into in-depth about shot furnaces. Check out my episode, I believe it's called The Revolutionary War Execution, down at Fort Griswold in Connecticut. Make sure you check that out. And that is the last blockhouse to ever be built at a fort in the state of Maine. This blockhouse was built between 1844 and 1846. Now, up here by the blockhouse, which is where I am right now, there was a second battery, an upper battery, that consisted of essentially nobody knows what it was manned with. No one knows the cannon fire or how much firepower it actually ever had. Now, the fort remained fairly active and fairly busy all throughout the 1800s. It was manned during the War of 1812, but it didn't see any action. The fort was expanded in the 1840s when the U.S. butted heads with, once again, the British, but this time they butted heads with the British over the border. It was a border dispute between Maine and New Brunswick. Now, the fort remained busy, especially through the American Civil War, and much of the current day structures come from that expansion during the 1840s into leading up into the American Civil War. And that was under the third system of U.S. fortifications, is where most of these structures that you still see today were built. Now, Fort McClary is here at the mouth, right there, of the Piscataqua River. And the reason why it's always been a defensive position here at the mouth of the Piscataqua is because of what lies about a mile up the Piscataqua River, which is the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. And now, Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, pretty big thing you want to protect that. That's how you build ships, and in today's world, then maintain subs. It's a cold one. And currently, I am taking shelter from the wind in the original powder house. Powder magazine, built in 1808. The saying of keep your powder dry, literally what that means. This was constructed in 1808, mainly just to keep all the cannons powder dry, out of the elements, especially being up here in New England. But yeah, this is pretty cool. We already saw the foundation of another rifleman's house on the other end of the Fort McClary. They still have essentially the remnants of another rifleman's house, which this was built in 1808. Oh, all right. Well, apparently you go through a window. Or maybe there were steps leading in and this was the doorway. I don't know. Oh, God. Now, Fort McClary was manned at the start of the Civil War by the Maine Coast Guard and the Maine Artillery Company. And now, one special note here. One thing you don't want to get confused in this history is the Maine Coast Guard and then the Maine State Guard. The Maine State Guard would eventually join in the manning of Fort McClary. And the Maine State Guard joined the other two companies that were here at Fort McClary in 1864. And in the Maine State Guard, there's a very interesting private that served here at Fort McClary as a cook attached to the Maine State Guard. And that was none other than the current sitting Vice President Hannibal Hamlin. And Hannibal Hamlin was asked numerous times throughout the course of his life, why, as a vice president, was he going to serve as a cook at essentially a small fort in the southern coast of Maine? He said that it was the honorable thing for any citizen to do at that time. Got to tip the cap to that. Pretty cool. As you can see, right, this is where the lower battery would have been, right here where we're standing. And then you have a little bit of a granite wall, and then a big earthwork on top. And now this granite wall and this earthwork was built between 1808 and 1844. Now what you're looking at here are some of, they're called Dahlgren guns, and they're named after the man who designed them and built them, which was Admiral John Dahlgren, who became known as the father of American naval ordnance. And the crazy thing about these cannons here that you see is that they can fire shells that can weigh between 32 pounds and over 400-pound shells. Yes, you heard me correctly. There's the man himself, John Dahlgren, who is standing next to a 50-pounder cannon right there. Caponeer, 1864 to 1868. Yeah, why not? Yeah, this is pretty wild. I will say this though, it's very, very warm down here considered to what the wind is outside. All right, so I'm still down here in the Caponeer. I'm gonna go Caponeer because I'm from New England anyway. But I'm down here for a few reasons. One, this is mainly to provide fire down on anyone who's trying to storm from the ocean side, and provide effective fire from anyone trying to land troops out on the beach at, say, low tide. It's not much of a beach, more of a rocky shore, but at low tide. That's why you have all these firing ports. The other reason why I'm still down here is because it's about 25 degrees outside, and the wind is blowing 15 to 20. It's cold. It's no joke. I mean, what do you expect being in Maine in January? But yeah, it's cold. I'm currently on top of the Caponeer position, and that's covering, that position is covering essentially if anyone wanted to try and storm the fort from the ocean. And as you can see, ooh, that would have been a really tough way to try and overtake this fort. Now I am making my way back up towards the high ground. We're gonna go past the blockhouse, which right there. We're gonna go past the blockhouse, past the powder magazine, and there's one more thing I do want to show you guys before season 3 wraps up, with this being the finale. So here we go. The only thing, if you're not going to take Fort McClary by sea, the only other option is to take it by land. So you need some sort of land defense. What's going to help you if the enemy gets behind you from land and try to flank you to take this fort? Well, they thought of that. All along the perimeter is this tall granite wall, and that we are inside the fort, and this is heading towards essentially to if you were going to man the perimeter behind the granite wall. Obviously that'd make no sense if you weren't. Powder magazine, built 1864 to 1868. Right, in terms of warfare, the last thing you really can afford to lose is your ability to fight. Everything else can go out the window. Sleep, food, all that stuff, irrelevant when it comes in terms of combat. What's one thing in this time period that you really need to make sure you keep secure and working in an orderly fashion is your weapon system. In this case, powder. Keeping your powder dry is crazily important. So as you can see, right, come down here if you're gonna man the perimeter. Probably assigned a fighting position or a bay, and then you have your field of fire in which you are responsible for covering. And if everyone covers their field of fire correctly and accurately, you should have no problem holding off whoever's trying to take this position away from you. In this area where we just were is known as the Bastion. Interesting. So, outer perimeter wall to protect the fort from in case of land attack was built between 1864 and 1868. Now I hope everyone enjoyed this season of Running Down History, this being the season 3 finale and all. And you're going to hear from me very soon as far as what's in store for season 4. And I got some cool places coming up this season. Forgot to plug the channel. Remember to smash that subscribe button, give the episode a like or thumbs up, and comment down below what type of history you guys would like to see on the channel.